Hello, I am Chris Lee. He is Blake Lovell. We are talking SEC football. Blake, week one is complete and surprise. Who is at the top of our SEC power rankings today? Who do you think, Blake?
I think it's Alabama, but I'll tell you who's at the top of the power rankings in my household right now. That is the Dogs, which not the Georgia Bulldogs, but the two dogs that are running around my house barking. So they are not happy, perhaps, with you ranking Alabama at number one. I think they would have preferred Georgia, but maybe you've got a nice claim to either. But I think the Tide are the better choice. So
The dogs are barking. The dogs sound ready for Atlanta. The
that
dogs,
there.
we can argue whether they're ready for Atlanta or not. I think the defense was ready for Atlanta. The offense, that might be another thing. But
Maybe they think Bryce Young's outside. Maybe they're getting ready for Atlanta and they're barking at Bryce Young because they see how good he is and they're like, hey, we need to get to him and take him down. So they're looking for the sack early on here in the household. So
well, in all seriousness, is there any debate about Alabama or Georgia at the top two? I mean, A&M would be the team that has a case in there. I don't know that I saw enough in week one, especially with three interceptions from a freshman starting quarterback to budge from that. Now, you could say that Georgia's offense was not entirely impressive, and I think that would be right. But my goodness, you Clemson at 3 points, and that says something, especially when Georgia's without Eric Gilbert and Washington and Tyke Smith and some of the kids that it was missing. I mean, look, it is impressive to beat Clemson under any circumstance like that, but I think particularly when you consider all the guys that were out for Georgia. I mean, you can say 10 points, and I would say yes. Maybe we should be concerned about that, but at the end of the day, I would point to Georgia 10 and Clemson 3 and say I think that's pretty loud.
yeah, I mean it's a top five game to start the season. It's already a challenge in and of itself. And I think like you said, to hold Clemson to 3 points, which we know it's different now. I mean, Trevor Lawrence isn't there, and it's sort of, there's going to be a filling out process, I think, for Clemson. But to do that in game one, like it's pretty impressive. And I think, I mean, Georgia's offense, right? Like they're going to play some good defenses in the SEC, but they're not necessarily going to play, those kind of defenses every week. I mean, Clemson's got a really good defense. I don't think you take anything away from Clemson in that regard either. So, yeah, Georgia's they're really good, and they're going to have a chance. I mean, they're undoubtedly, you mentioned A&M, and certainly I'm sure Ole Miss put up a lot of points and looked pretty good, but I think it's Alabama, it's Georgia, and then maybe it is A&M. I think we need to see a little bit more on that to probably get a better feel. But to me, Alabama and Georgia are the clear top two, and I think maybe perhaps A&M gets to that level, but I think I'm still in wait and see mode on that. So.
Well, let's talk Alabama. Have you worn the Dolphins shirt on purpose? Are you predicting a run the table like the
Well,
the 72 Dolphins? Is that what you're
you know,
trying to
it's
say here without saying it?
it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because the parallels are, you've got a team that could very well, run the table, which would not surprise at this point when it comes to Alabama. But remember, the Dolphins are, I mean, they're Alabama South now with Tua and Jalen Waddle's there, and I'm sure there are other people on that roster that I'm not thinking about. But yeah, like I think that's sort of the adopted team for a lot of Alabama fans now is knowing that the Tua's there and all that. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting, I think, for the Dolphins. So maybe it's a good omen there. So
Yeah, well, look, they looked the part. The question was Bryce Young, right? Because I think you just assume we're to this point where Alabama has been so dominant that you presume that whoever goes under center, whoever takes over at cornerback, or name any number of positions, just picks up where Alabama left off. Because Alabama's done this for so long, we take it for granted. I don't take it for granted. Something always has to end. But my goodness, it didn't look like this is coming to an end the way Bryce Young played the other day.
no, and I mean it's a we talk about like a Georgia's win over Clemson like it's a top five game, but like Miami, it's not like Miami was this middle of the pack ACC team. People thought coming into the season like they just Alabama just goes out and steamrolls a team that's preseason top 15 team and like that. I think to me that's always the difference when we talk about like any sport. When a good team cannot just win close games against good teams, which Alabama will have close games, but like when you go out and just dominate another really good team, like to me that says a lot more than winning close games. Like I think,
Mm-hmm.
and that's an interesting debate, but if you can just go out and not necessarily need a late field goal or touchdown to beat a team like that, if you just go out from start to finish and completely decimate them, which is what Alabama did for the most part. that speaks volumes to me and probably says a lot more about how good you really are, rather than, let's say, you
Yeah.
go through a season, we know luck's involved, right? Like there are going to be some games you get more lucky than others, and there are going to be some seasons where you win 3 or 4 of those games that are decided by 3 or 6 points or something. But if you just go out and just steamroll people, that I think tells me a lot more about you in that type of scenario.
Let's go to A&M. I had them 3 this week. I would have liked to see a little cleaner offensive game, but the one thing that we thought with A&M was the defense would be there. And look, I don't know what you make of giving up 10 points to Kent State. That was a team that scored a ton of points a year ago. Of course, it was only against the MAC, and it was also against part of the worst of the MAC. But look, you give up 10 points in an opener, that's going to be pretty good for the most part. And I think for now, you've got to rank A&M third without knowing
Yeah.
anything else. Because I don't think anybody else jumped up and just demonstrably said, we're better. And I don't know that anybody could under the
Yeah.
circumstances of week one, to be honest.
No, I think the team we would have expected to do anything to be in that conversation would have been LSU, but we know what happened there. And so now that LSU has dropped out of that, like A&M was the only other choice, I think, to put them there. And like I said, I'm not knocking A&M. I think we had a lot more certainty about Alabama and Georgia, even though A&M's a top 10 team. It's just we knew still, I think, what the expectations are going to be, and there are still some questions I think for A&M, but they're a justified team to be in the top 10 right now. But I think we learn a lot more about them probably along the way than maybe we already feel like we know a lot of those things about Alabama and Georgia. But still feel like there's some things to learn about A&M. But still, I mean, when you're a top 10 team in the SEC, being a top 10 team is good, but sometimes, it's not always good enough because you could still have 2 or 3 teams in front of you. But at least A&M's kind of cemented themselves pretty early, I think, as that third team. Now it's just, can they become that number 2 team or number 1
Yeah.
team? I think that's going to take a little bit more of work to get there. So
Blake, when you're putting together power rankings, I think if you're not struggling at some places, you're probably not doing enough research. And there's 2 that I put down that I'm like, okay, this could look really bad later. But I'm going to go with it now because this is about having fun and having debate. I put Ole Miss at 4 because I love the way Ole Miss's defense looked against Louisville on Monday night. And I put LSU down to 8. And I know LSU went on the road and lost to a UCLA team where opinions were really split, and maybe we'll look back at the end of the year and say Chip Kelly got it together, right? And this is just what it was. They ran into a good team, but man, coupled with last year's issues, with the fact LSU's got 2 stud corners and they got thrown on again, and I say they, I mean the defense. I'm not putting the blame on Ricks and Stingley, but here's my point. LSU's always got talent, and they got whipped, I think, defensively. And so, to me, there's a lot of other good teams in there. Auburn, I think, looked good. Florida, I don't know that I'd say Florida looked good, but I think Florida's got talent. Dan Mullen's got a history there. I don't know. I just had a hard time putting LSU over those other 7 teams, and maybe I'm reading too much into week one. But with Ole Miss, the offense is probably going to be there. It was last night. The question has been the defense, and I thought the defense showed up on Monday night. They held Louisville to no points in the first half. Louisville racked up some points in yards, but the game was over, and to me, it was game flow in watching that, and to me, that counted for a lot with Ole Miss. Maybe I'm overrating Ole Miss at 4, but right now, that's what it feels to me. Sometimes you've got to go out on a little bit of a limb, and I did.
yeah, I mean, it's just like you said. I think the LSU part of the equation, it's what you mentioned about once we learn more about UCLA, I think you have a better feel of where LSU's at, and I think that will take a little while to figure out. And obviously, LSU's results in and of itself will tell you a lot too. But I think that'll tell us, is this LSU team just one that's going to be right back in the middle of the pack, or were they playing a UCLA team that's going to end up having the type of season that they finally have been waiting for under Chip Kelly? I think that'll take a little time, probably a couple weeks to figure out there. But I'm kind of with you. Like, I don't know if there's anything with Florida necessarily that would make me look at them and say I'm going to put them ahead of Ole Miss right now. You talk about Auburn, Kentucky. I thought Kentucky's offense, that's something too. Like, I'm not going to put Kentucky up in that top 3 or 4, but their offense looked pretty good, and I think that was certainly a pleasant sight, I think, because they've got a good defense too, and I think Kentucky's going to be interesting. Like, that's the one team right now, like they're in that middle of the pack, like you ranked them at 7, but I think Kentucky's one of those really
Mm-hmm.
interesting teams to where if the offense can be sort of as creative and dynamic as it was, I know it's game one and you're playing an inferior opponent, but I'm fascinated by them because I think that could be
Yeah.
a team we look up and maybe they're one, that moves ahead of an Auburn or a Florida
Mm-hmm.
in the rankings. And all of a sudden we're saying Kentucky's maybe the number 5 best team in the SEC, something like that. Or, like we said, maybe LSU turns things around and all of a sudden they get back in that conversation. But I would circle Kentucky as a team that I'm pretty interested to see. Also knowing
Yeah.
that they play in the East, I think they could be pretty interesting this season. So
Yeah, Kentucky was the mirror image of Ole Miss to me in terms of what are we looking for, and we just went over Ole Miss and said, can they defend? And I liked what I saw on Monday night with Kentucky. And look, I may end up looking stupid for this, okay? Because it's Louisiana Monroe, and I don't like
we
making
all will about
conclusions.
something. So
Right, right. But here's the deal. Okay, we know that under Mark Stoops, Kentucky can defend. I mean, that's no secret. That's been their MO ever since he got there. Got 2 or 3 years in, started to get his players. It's can they pass? And I thought Will Levis was really good. And I get that he had some guys open, but you've seen Kentucky quarterbacks against bad teams that can't throw. I just liked the way he was in command. They've got a downfield passing game now with Wandale Robinson and Josh Ali. And I don't know, to me, Kentucky at 7, people may pick bones with that, but watching them, that just felt like the right place to put them. We've only got a couple minutes left, and so I'm going to have to skip past Kentucky for now. But from there, I've got Missouri, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Tennessee, South Carolina, Vandy. Easiest one, Vandy at 14. I mean, the Commodores, my goodness, you think that it can't get worse at Vandy. They did something they've never done. They've never lost to an FCS team. And not just that, they got blown out by one, and it was by an unranked FCS team. So that one's settled. Missouri, I like the fact that Blake Aldridge did some things. They gave them a playmaker on defense. Offensively, they were solid. Mississippi State, I mean, my goodness, I've got them 10. It was ready to be about 12. and then a shanked field goal in the game kind of bailed them out.
yeah.
Arkansas, didn't like the way Arkansas looked, but I'm not willing to throw away a win yet. Tennessee, I like the Vols defense. Joe Milton, to me, I don't know that he's the guy to lead you offensively. The passes seem to have one speed. And in South Carolina, nice win for the Gamecocks. What was it, 46-0 with the grad assistant quarterback. But Kevin Harris didn't play. And look, all you can do is take care of what's in front of you. And if you could say, well, you take a win against an FCS team for granted, again, Exhibit A would be Vanderbilt. So
I was going to say
any beefs with what we've got to round it out?
No, I was going to say I think Vanderbilt would be perfectly fine with a 46-0 win
Yeah.
over anyone right now. Yeah, that was certainly the most disappointing thing, the most glaring thing at the bottom. I think Missouri, they were someone that's going to be in that conversation with Kentucky. In the East, I think that a lot of people were, where do we put these two? Who's in front? Who's behind in that group? So I think that's going to be one. Elsewhere, like you said, I don't think we have high expectations. Tennessee, South Carolina, teams like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, that's we talk about Kentucky, right? Like you're looking down here, Missouri, Tennessee, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, all in the bottom, 6 in the SEC. And so if you're Kentucky, there's really a chance to make some significant jumps there. So I think you just look at the bottom part, and that's where, we talk about some of these teams may struggle, specifically in the East. So can Missouri take that jump forward? I think that's going to be another interesting storyline to watch too.
Final thought. We've literally got to go in about 2 minutes here. What do you think about the reintroduction of defense to the SEC? I kind of liked it this week.
Yeah, we finally, get back to playing defense. That was the theme for a long time. We've missed the national championship games between Alabama and LSU, where no one scores touchdowns, and maybe we get that this year. Like maybe it's Alabama and Georgia, right? Like maybe we get a nice 10-7 national championship. Although I think Bryce Young will have something to say about that. But it's nice to see more defense being played, unlike some of the other conferences, aka the Big 12.
You've disappointed me, and do you know why?
I don't know.
Where was
There are
the
many
word rock
reasons,
fight,
I'm sure.
Blake? Rock fight,
Well,
man.
I
put it on a
save
tee
that
for you.
basketball. We say that for
We
basketball season.
We set our
I'm
rules
sorry.
here, don't we?
Yes. I would like to save that for basketball season. I think there
Okay.
needs to be another term for football season. Rock fight is only in 40 to 38 games in SEC basketball. So
Are you saying Clemson,
that's
Georgia did not feel like a rock fight?
well, it felt like all right, I'll give you this one. I'll give it to you for this week, but by next week we have to come up with a different term. Like we need to trademark that somewhere. So basketball, SEC basketball rock fight. Like there's a shirt.
Blake Lovell, you have your homework for week 2. But anyway, hope people enjoyed this. Again, we've got to run to something else. So we might have spent a little more time on some of these teams if we just didn't have it. But I'm Chris Lee at the 14. He's Blake Lovell. Thanks for listening to this, and we'll catch you again very soon.